mentioned early in the onset, what you studied this because you saw how Christianity was expressed in different parts of it. How many different Christian traditions, and I feel like I have to brace myself for this because there's going to be a huge answer. How many Christian traditions are there? How many did you include? And what made you include them as a tradition?
So it's actually a small number, depending on how you think about it.
Okay.
So we identify what we call 4 major Christian traditions, which are Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, and Independents. So only 4. But within those 4 major Christian traditions, we estimate there are 45,000 denominations in the world. So that's the big number. But also keep in mind, there's 2.5 billion Christians in the world. So there's a lot of Christians in the world, but there are a lot of denominations. And part of the reason is kind of the 2 sides of a coin. So one is when missionaries went and planted churches all around the world, a lot of those churches disinherited indigenous Christians. So the indigenous Christians weren't allowed to have leadership positions or all these different kinds of things. So indigenous Christians, such as in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, they broke away from the mission-founded churches to start their own denominations. And they did it because they wanted to be Christian in a way that made sense for them culturally. So that makes sense. So that splintering has happened quite a lot. And in doing so, we have all these denominations that make cultural and linguistic sense in that context. And that's a good thing. But the other side of the 45,000 denominations coin is theological disagreement. It's just Christians who can't get along on all different kinds of things. Some quite serious, like the role of women in your denomination or the role of LGBTQ people in your denomination. And some of it is rather trivial, like the color of the carpet or what time the church service is going to be or something frivolous like that. So we have lots of reasons why there are so many different denominations in the world. Some, in my opinion, more legitimate reasons than others.
Understandably. With that 45,000, I mean, you compiled the stat on this. I'll wait. Can you name all of them? Just go ahead. You can start.
How much time do we have? I can start with the letter A. And
45,000. Okay. So all those traditions, which is the biggest one?
Catholics.
How many?
About 1 billion. About half of the world's Christians are Catholics.
And so then the second largest would be roughly?
Protestants.
Okay.
And then Independents, and then Orthodox.
So Orthodox are the smallest. How many Orthodox flavors are there?
Well, there's 2 major branches. So there's Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox. So the Orthodox Church is just structurally different because it's more aligned with ethnicity and history and culture. So within the Eastern Orthodox, you have all the different flavors: Russian Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox, Belarusian, Romanian, Greek. And then within Oriental Orthodox, you have, say, the Ethiopian Orthodox, the Eritrean Orthodox, so on and so forth. So it kind of matches the ethnic community.
Wow. I spent a year going through the Orthodox Study Bible, just wanting to learn more, to understand how did we get our canon, how, theirs and their shape, because I do want to understand Christianity around the world to see how it's different incarnations and what it looks like. But when you get into the different Christian traditions, you even have another subgroup, and forgive me if I'm not classifying this right, but you have different Christian movements within that. Would that be right? What are these Christian movements?
Yes. So within the 4 major traditions are 2 movements. One is the evangelical movement, and the second is the Pentecostal charismatic movement. And the reason we call them movements is because they're found within the major Christian traditions. So you can be, for example, a Catholic charismatic, or a Protestant evangelical, or an independent charismatic, or independent evangelical charismatic. So there's overlap between the movements and the traditions. And that's where some of the complexity comes out in world Christianity of who is an evangelical, who is a Pentecostal, who is a charismatic. So we're wrestling with all those kinds of discussions as well.
Well, when you get into that, how do you identify? Because that's the question I get when I talk to people about stats and they want to know how many Christians are in the world. Inevitably, they want to know about certain sex groups, cults that have been classified. Mm-hmm. And usually, I remember talking to Todd Johnson about this, your colleague, and he was mentioning that you allow self-identification because it's too difficult for your quantitative purposes to go through the different aspects. So is it that self-identification fills you in that stat? Is that how that works? That they identify as Christian, or do they not identify as Christian, even though they might be, like Jehovah's Witnesses, for example? Where do they fit in there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fabulous question. And it's a question everyone should always ask whenever you see statistics. What is the definition of the thing that they are describing statistically? Ask the questions, scrutinize the data, be a little bit skeptical, and then do your homework to find the answer. So it's okay to ask those kinds of questions of data, even my own data. Ask the question, what do you mean by this? Who are these people? So because we are social scientists, we are using self-identification as our measuring stick for all religions in the world. If I were a theologian or a biblical studies scholar or something else, I might use a different measuring stick. So if you self-identify as a Christian, you are a Christian. So that means groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormons, they self-identify as Christians. So therefore we include them as such. I'm not going to make any theological statements about who's, quote, in or out of world Christianity. That's someone else's job, frankly.